Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am the Forest of the East. Thank you for joining us this week. I have a conversation with Jon Dennis. Jon is a lawyer out in Eastern Oregon who's been at the center of a lot of the conversations and influencing the rollout of Measure 109. Measure 109 is the much talked about measure that has to do with bringing psilocybin into forms of legalization. And I didn't even know for myself that I've heard a lot about it, but there's a lot to the law and there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of clarity that I wanted to bring to it and questions. So I know you're going to really enjoy this because I'm hoping it'll answer a lot of your questions. And it's quite fascinating because many states are looking to Oregon to see what they're up to. And they've had some time, Oregon, to put this law into practice. And starting in 2023, it's supposed to be in practice. So this will be an important discussion for us to have. But first, I'm recording this in advance because I'm on tour right now, God willing. And I'm going to say thank you to everyone who came to the dates so forth. But we have Portland, Oregon on November 8th. And then in Nevada City, then San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, San Diego, Phoenix, Arizona, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Austin, Texas. You can go to eastforest.org for tickets. It is a ceremony concert where you can lie down. You have that kind of space for yourself. You can BYOP, bring your own pillow, as it were. And we'll be doing these concerts in the round, with the stage and the piano and everything in the center. So we are in this together, creating hopefully a magic space of music and inner insight. And I hope to see you there. Thank you for spreading the word. And thank you to all of our council members on Patreon. That is how you can support this podcast. Patreon.com/EastForest. I share demos and unreleased music and meditations, as well as a monthly Zoom council. Thank you to everyone over there on the council who supports the project. It's so fun. It's one of the things that warms my heart the most when we gather together and get to share. And it means a lot to me. Patreon.com/EastForest and JourneySpace.com is where you can get online facilitations as well as a music guidance library. It's an extremely affordable way to be helped into your psychedelic growth and guidance and also just doing your inner work. That's JourneySpace.com. Special shout out, thank you to Numinous who's been sponsoring this tour. It means a lot to us to help make it sustainable. I also want to say a little thank you to Ned. Ned makes beautiful wellness products, very high-end CBD products, and they've been providing some support for us as well. And Hugger Mugger has been helping us with those mats for you who have purchased the VIP tickets, and so much more. So yeah, thank you again. Also, if things have gone according to plan, on November 11th, 11/11 as it were, the portal of 11/11, I will be releasing a new album called Headwaters. It will be on anywhere you listen to music. I will tell you more about that album when it comes out. But it was a beautiful live experience, a mixture of ceremony and concert in a private home in southern Utah with a stunningly beautiful C. Bechstein piano that I am in love with, and I wanted to explore it in that ceremonial space. So we gathered some friends together, and I was very, very nervous and hit record, and magic ensued. And I put that record together. It's 4 songs. It's about 45 minutes, and it's called Headwaters. And on November 11th, you can listen to it wherever you listen to music. And thank you for sharing that. And let us know what you think. Positive comments only at info@eastforest.org or on socials, East Forest, Instagram, East Forest Music, on the other social media black holes. Okay, we're going to get into this conversation to learn all about all things Measure 109 in Oregon with our new friend, Jon Dennis. Jon, good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to hop on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You said you're in Eastern Oregon, right?
Yeah, I live over in Ontario, close to you, right on the Idaho border.
Yeah, I don't know anyone else who lives in Ontario. I grew up on the other side of the state. I mean, how does someone end up in Ontario, Oregon?
Yeah, I actually took a job out here working for a nonprofit law office that gives free legal help to people living in poverty. So I took a job out here about 6 years ago now, and have stayed even after leaving the position. So it's kind of the slow pace of rural life in the high desert. I find it suit me rather well most days.
Yeah. Where were you coming from? Were you still in Oregon?
Yeah, I went to school in Portland and lived there for a couple of years afterwards. But originally, I'm from Kansas.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, great. So we crossed paths through my partner Rada, and we can talk about all sorts of things. But I did want to get a lay of the land because we bumped into each other at the Horizons conference in Portland. And I would imagine one of the reasons the Horizons conference was even going on there is because of what's happening with Measure 109 and other energies of advancing forms of legalization and medicalization and so forth with psychedelics. So let's start with if you could just tell us what your involvement is with that process, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, thanks. It's kind of been a whole process. Measure 109 passed, was elected by the voters, adopted through a vote by the will of the people in November of 2020. And during the 109 campaign, I was involved as a volunteer to running phone banks and helping gather signatures and just kind of doing my part, whatever I could out in Eastern Oregon to try to help, promote the measure and make sure that it passed. And
Yeah.
when the board started meeting in March of 2021, the Psilocybin Advisory Board, I started going to those meetings, and I've attended virtually every one of them in the nearly 2 years or a year and a half now that the board's been meeting. So I've been following the process very closely, first kind of just as a member of the public. And as time's gone on, I started giving more and more public comments, giving voice to things that I thought needed to be voiced within these kind of high-level state conversations around psilocybin regulation. And over time, I've just become more involved, and eventually was asked to present to a couple of the subcommittees about how the state might permit kind of religious practice or community-based practice within the 109 program. So I drafted a proposed set of regulations that were going to optimize for an affordable community-based kind of paradigm of psilocybin services within the measure. And so I've kind of promoted that, ran it through a couple of different subcommittees and got approval, but went through the board process. And the board ultimately voted to not adopt that framework. But of course, those are just recommendations to the full state
Right.
agency. So the state agency could still decide whatever it wanted to with respect to that. And we're still hoping that the state decides to create kind of a community-based paradigm for services.
Who's on this board? Who's making these decisions?
So the Psilocybin Advisory Board is a volunteer board of, I believe, 15 different people. The vast majority of the people on the board have professional credentialing in kind of the medical or therapeutic kind of realms. There's a lot of psychotherapists. There's some people who work in hospice. There's some medical doctors and researchers. And there's kind of a couple of there's and so because of that composition, the recommendations from the board end up looking really largely medical and really therapeutic.
Right.
And as of course we know, Measure 109 is not really a medical or therapeutic program. It's really a supervised adult use program. So we think that a lot of the actual services that will be offered to the public through this program will be kind of driven largely by consumer preferences, which will include medical therapeutic uses, but it will also include a whole lot of other reasons why people might want to take psilocybin. So hopefully the work that we've done and kind of advocating around these is to hope that there can be a more diverse kind of set of offerings that are more informed by community and the actual psychedelic culture, so that it's not just like siloed from like a medical light kind of program.
Okay. Well, because it feels important because there are many other states who are looking at what's going to happen in Oregon as a bellwether. It's their lodestar to see how do we do this. And let's just start. I'm not asking you to summarize the whole law, but what are some of the misconceptions you think people have about what did pass or didn't pass? Can you give us like the bullet points? Because you already made it sound like, I love the phrase adult supervised use. It's a weird phrase. But is that different than legalization? I'm assuming it is.
Yeah. So I like to say Measure 109 is undergoing a reputational makeover. So back in 2020, when it was still a ballot initiative, it was kind of marketed to voters, kind of emphasizing the option for it to be a therapeutic application, like for their people to use psilocybin as therapy within the program. But that only represents a kind of a portion of the overall program, and it actually lets people to take psilocybin basically for any reason. Now it's different from kind of a consumer, like a dispensary model, like we see in cannabis, where you go to a place and you purchase your product and you take it home and use it on your own. Under the 109 program, you purchase it at a licensed facility that they're calling a service center, a psilocybin service center. And you have to buy it there, you have to take it there, and you have to basically experience all of the effects of psilocybin at this licensed premises.
That sounds bad. Who wants to? That's the last place you want to take. Nobody wants to dose up at the place they get the stuff from. Not to mention it lasts a long time.
Yeah, so these could be 6-hour sessions at these locations, these premises. But I think the flip side of that is these premises are going to be custom designed to really have the best experience within the limitation of it having to occur on site there. So, I think we'll see the rise of what I like to call microdose cafes, where people come and they'll do like an hour yoga session in the morning with a microdose before they go about their day. We'll see more kind of ceremonial offerings where people do psilocybin in a context that looks more potentially religious.
Concerts, like could that license for that center go to another location, say an event place, and they're the hosts, in essence, for a ceremony concert?
So the limitation on that's a really amazing question. And I've been wondering for several years now whether a service center could look like sort of a concert hall, where the role of the facilitator was similar to that of a Zendo harm reduction tent kind of place, where that's the role that the facilitator plays. And there's nothing in the measure that prevents that. And so far, within the draft regulations that the state's about ready to start taking public comment on, there is a rule that says not more than 25 people can take psilocybin at a service center at the same time. So you'd be, at this point, pretty limited by the number of attendees who would be able to take psilocybin, but presumably there's less limitation on the overall number that could be there. So you could have potentially a relatively small number of people that take psilocybin legally at a show, such as your ceremonial.
Okay, with this gets a little confusing though, because it's still a Scheduled I substance federally, and so I'm just curious, this with the state officials, have they given any indication if they're essentially going to be lightening up on restriction on the underground, essentially? I don't anticipate would the feds still do raids like they do sometimes with cannabis stuff, where then it's legal and you get into that weird situation? I mean, that was happening in the Obama era, which was terrible.
Yeah, so there's considerable speculation that the feds, what the feds will do once this program goes live in January. So some people are kind of taking a wait and see approach, and they're going to let some other more risk tolerant people be the first ones to open up shop to see if it attracts federal retribution, if you will. But I think others, and the truth is nobody knows for sure what the feds will do. They haven't, to my knowledge, yet given any kind of formal statement or opinion about how they're going to treat this. But I think luckily, because we have quite a few years now of cannabis experience and the feds are now largely taking a hands-off approach, I think there's amongst those of us who are kind of maybe early movers in this space, we're kind of all hedging our bets or hoping that the feds take a similar, hands-off approach here. But in fairness, we can't say for sure that there wouldn't be but that they will. So there is a little bit of kind of risk associated with that for sure.
Didn't the Biden administration quite recently put out a statement about cannabis and expunging, I don't know if that's the right legal word, sentences federally, which there weren't many. I think there's 6,000. I mean, that's a lot, but not if you think about the size of this country and that most convictions are state convictions. But I wonder, did you think that was a signal to where things are going? Do you think there might be a last minute, of all people, Biden, the original drug war guy, is like, it could actually happen, right? Do you think Biden's dosed up and he finally got his, he finally saw the light? I don't know. Or maybe it's just age. He's just finally like, what am I doing? It's probably politics, frankly. It's probably just the winds have shifted and he wants to whip the votes.
Yeah, his advisors, I think, probably have played a large hand in that decision of his administration to relax some of that and to call for a rescheduling of cannabis, which is, I think,
oh my God, really overdue.
Yeah, long overdue.
How many states? It's like, I don't even know. Is it a majority? It's over half.
Yeah,
have created. They're finally like, okay, we'll lighten up on.
I've heard it said that our current legal situation with cannabis is kind of a perfect example and case study of how completely dysfunctional our political system is, where you have a majority of both parties who agree that cannabis reform needs to happen.
And they don't do it. It doesn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be like, there's zero blowback. Okay, we'll finally do it. But going back, though, to the question, what do you think, just intuition-wise, not I'm asking for do you think it's showing that's, everyone says, 1, 2, 3 years, psilocybin's going to be legalized? I'm not so sure, given the pace before this.
Yeah, so there's when people talk about legalization, I think there's several things to unpack there. First off, through the FDA, we are already in advanced stage clinical trials that will eventually, it seems, in my perspective, nearly certain that psilocybin will be available through a doctor's prescription within the next probably 2 to 4 years.
Federally? You mean as a federal? Wow.
Yeah.
Look, that makes sense, right? But I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. And so MDMA is already really close. I think they've now pushed back the anticipated date for MDMA to be available through a doctor's prescription to 2024 now. And so that's through MAPS work. But, I think we already see not just those two, but we see a number of different Schedule I substances that are being researched for, therapeutic kind of applications, including MDMA, including psilocybin, including LSD, including 5-MeO, including
really
peyote. Yeah, there's a lot of them that are being researched for different types of uses. So I think within the near future, within our lifetimes, we're definitely going to see, unless there's some kind of huge backlash that I don't think at this point seems really even politically possible with how much kind of hype and momentum there is behind psychedelics right now. Though clearly, assuming nothing really unforeseen and unexpected happens, we will see them coming online through more medical kind of containers within the next few years. And so what's interesting about Oregon's program is that it kind of stands in contrast to that, where this isn't a medical program. There's no a diagnosis that is required to take it. There's not a doctor that has to be involved with prescribing it. It's really an adult use system where people will come and take it for a variety of reasons without really having to undergo like complex medical screening or anything like that.
But let me just clarify. You're saying, though, the way it's written now, you would have to go to a center to procure it legally and consume it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fairly restrictive because I think a lot of people are probably thinking like, oh, there's going to be Amsterdam style cafes and I can buy it and then do what I want with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of cannabis, where generally speaking, you're not allowed to consume cannabis anywhere in public. You take it from the dispensary, and you're supposed to take it only to your home and only do it indoors. And that's supposed to be kind of it. This is exactly the opposite, where you take it on site and you take it in this kind of place with other people, whether, facilitators on hand that are licensed by the state and who have went through a training program. And have been, kind of educated basically as being able to provide, harm reduction care and some basics around, screening and offering, integration after the services. So it's a closed loop system, and it's not, those are some significant limitations of the Measure 109 program. That you can't just take it backpacking with you, or you can't take it at home something like that. But
when I go to Portland, I smell weed on the streets everywhere. So, I mean, people will do what they do. They've already been taking it backpacking. But I would imagine if they want their mushrooms, they're not going to go to the center because they can't even walk out with them. They're going to get them wherever they got them before. They could pick them off the ground in the forest. They go to Forest Park, and if they know what they're doing, and get what they need. It's just interesting to me that that's what they consider the safest. Because I am curious, like, if there'll be any backlash, because I know there's certain counties that also said we don't want this, which I didn't even know they could do that. But apparently, so now it'll probably be just in the urban areas of the counties that allow it to happen. And people, like, if there is any incident, let's say it's like people feel a little freer and they're in a park and it gets a little, just simple, gets a little wild, the police come as a complaint. Now there's a story that, the drugs are out there. This didn't happen with cannabis as far as I know. I mean, there was all this hubbubaloo about it. We get the shops and it's sort of a big nothing burger. It's just like, yeah, so you can get weed or not, whatever. It doesn't really change much in our world, just more tax dollars. So I'm wondering if it'll be kind of just a good thing and nothing, or if there might be some sentiment back.
Yeah, it's one of these $1 million questions that everybody's asking is what, I think the more kind of level heads who are not going into this, not naive, expect that there will be harm that does occur. Even if psilocybin is taken within the most kind of curated, safely, curated circumstances imaginable. Even I just heard Bob Jesse say recently that even in Johns Hopkins studies, people do get harmed by taking psilocybin. And so, I think it's important that we manage our expectations and not go in with kind of rose-colored glasses and realize that, some people, this is not going to sit well. And even with like the best screening, sorry, my dog's just taking this moment to...
well, my dog's taking a nap, so thank God you can't hear that thing. Yeah.
But he's, if there's... So there will be some things that happen, and we're all just hoping that all actors, all facilitators, all facilities that work under this program are just being really responsible and really careful, and like we all kind of owe it to each other and to the world and to most of all our clients to make sure that we're just being extra good stewards of their kind of their time in one of these facilities. So. It reflects poorly on all of us when something bad happens. So I think we're all kind of just hoping that people, use good judgment throughout this program.
Well, there also could be a cavalcade of good stories that are just more open, and it could be, more of that going on, I would imagine. But I want to ask you about two things. One is these training programs. But first, the obvious impediment here is cost. I would imagine because it's not really medicalized, it would especially not be part of any insurance system, and the people who need it the most couldn't afford it. But I also have heard that this law is sort of trying to keep a lot of this stuff in mind. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, so the affordability piece is one of the major challenges of the 109 program. There's so we don't really have we don't know for sure how expensive services will be under this program. And I've done some of my own figuring, and I've talked to other people who have independently done theirs. And I think where a lot of people are kind of landing is around the $1,500 to $2,000 kind of range. Part of that, I think, is because this is a novel marketplace and insurance is harder to get. I mean, insurance actuaries are going to be really overly cautious. And so that means premiums are going to be really high. And, every kind of aspect of the business like that will have kind of that type of risk built in. And I think that initially it's going to be quite a bit more expensive. And hopefully we can do some things as advocates and as people who are operating in the space to help keep costs low so that it can be affordable to people who kind of live along society's margins. But I think there is significant concern that this is going to be something that keeps a lot of people out, including, for instance, 520,000 Oregonians who live at or below the poverty line, and
which is really, really low. That's like a ridiculous level.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like
the actual, like, just, I mean, even if you're above the poverty line, you can still be in poverty. That's,
For like a single person, I think it's right around $11,000 per year.
God. Yeah, that's outrageous.
So, yeah. And that's, I mean, even if you're at 200% of that, you might not be able to afford a $2,000 session.
Definitely not. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for $2,000 for most people, it's like they have to think twice about it. So, I mean, do you think it's like this is sort of step one? And then are there ways to amend the program? Would that have to be done through a vote, or could that be done just through that board deciding to change things?
Yeah, so I've been working through a state senator's office about potential reforms that could be had to the measure to try to kind of fill in some of those gaps. So what happens a lot of times is that...
There's one of those trucks. Yeah. Serious business.
Yeah. There's kind of, I think a lot of times people go to these really expensive retreat type centers for their first psychedelic experience ever. There's kind of this apprehension that some people have, and it makes them feel safer and more comfortable if they have somebody who they know is licensed and who knows that, like, they're a professional and they can just really kind of help create like a tighter container and a safe container that feels safer and more supportive. And so people of means are sometimes more willing or able to spend kind of pretty substantial amounts of money to achieve that. And then what I've heard from some retreat operators in other countries who are doing this legally is that once somebody pays several $1,000s for their weekend or their week-long retreat or whatever, that they never go back and do it again because it's kind of like they've kind of got over the newbie nerves or whatever you want to call it. Like they've become a little bit more acquainted with it, so they no longer feel like that those expensive safeguards are necessary. Mm-hmm. So what could happen in Oregon if the OHA's rules are not kind of tailored for this is that you could have it be kind of solely like a tourist type of thing where people drop thousands of dollars for their people who are psychedelic, like that the whole program is designed for people who are psychedelically naive, who have their one experience and they never want to go back again. Yeah. And so some of our advocacy work has been around trying to make this for people who may not who may not be psychedelically naive or have thousands of dollars to spend on a single experience, so that it can be a more community-based kind of model, a more horizontal kind of model for what that looks like to really just help keep this affordable. And I think we could probably actually get it down to, under a couple $100s, all things included, if the regs were just optimized for, not, just a less medical looking program. So it's up to the state. And I think that at the beginning, the state's probably going to be a little more cautious as this rolls out, just because they want to err on the side of safety, which makes some degree of sense. But also if that becomes kind of institutionalized and exported, and that becomes the model, then that can be really hard to undo that precedent that gets set. So, we've just been kind of raising these issues of equity and affordability, kind of trying to keep it on their short stack to really just keep it top of mind. So I guess, we're getting ready to enter another public comment period from November 1st to 21st. So if anyone out there is listening and feels called to want to voice, concern to the state about affordability within the world's first regulated psychedelic services program, at least to my knowledge, then there's going to be an opportunity to do that here real soon.
So given these restrictions and so forth, do you feel that this measure is a step forwards or backwards?
That's the $1 million question. In terms of stigma, I think it's doing a lot to normalize and to kind of further the needle. I mean, I think like what we saw, for instance, this is maybe not the best example, but a lot of times when the law changes about a thing, people's opinions gradually follow, right? So like back when I'm thinking the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed, it didn't end racism. It ended a certain kind of legal racism, but people still held on to really horrible views about people who look different than themselves, or maybe not so different even. So I think that in terms of that kind of long-term social trajectory, I think that law changes such as Measure 109 do help kind of normalize it and help people to kind of reconsider it outside of the war on drugs. But there's a concern that I have, which is that if 109 creates this kind of industry that is protective and wants to keep these services expensive so that they can keep making money off of them, there begins to become this, I call it the psychedelics industrial complex that starts to form. And when that happens, they hire lobbyists, they get entrenched with government, and they protect their financial self-interest. So if that happens, in Oregon or in Colorado, which is, working on its own bill, or like we already see at the federal level, those kinds of self-interests can become very self-protective. And we already see Compass Pathways, for instance, filing patent applications to try to reserve holding hands within psychedelic therapy as their exclusive right, or use of soft lighting and relaxing, like soft furniture within psychedelic therapy.
I think that makes sense, John. That makes complete sense. They should be able to copyright a couch.
Yeah, they should own every couch in the world.
Well, speaking of, where is the psilocybin coming from? And it's sounding like it's all synthesized.
So within the first kind of rollout of the program, all psilocybin within the program must be derived through fungi. So there can be whole mushrooms, there can be extracts of those mushrooms, and there can probably be, there can also be food products like chocolate bars and things like that. But it'll all be derived from some sort of fungal biomass or biomatter. And eventually they may revisit that and allow synthetically, manufactured psilocybin. But at least in the initial phase, it's only mushroom based.
But who's going to grow it?
So the 109 system is what they call a closed loop system, which means the manufacturers have to be licensed by the state also, and they can't do wild foraging or anything like that. It has to be grown indoors at a separate licensed facility. And that has those manufacturers basically fuel the whole program.
So there's going to be like mushroom growers for the state, essentially, who have like sanctioned spaces where they just have like stacks of tubs growing mushrooms on cakes.
It's not clear yet how robust that products market's going to be. People, mushrooms are famously cheap to grow, and when you get through all of the regulatory morass that's going to have to be done to open a licensed premises like under this program, it's not clear how much joy will be left in the growing act.
Well, that's not good. You want them to be growing it and singing them songs. They can put on some East Forest music and give them to the mushrooms all the time. But somebody's got to do that. And so that does sound like a there's a job, there'll be some demand. They're imagining they only have so many licenses they give out for the growers.
Actually, there's not. I mean, other markets have limited number of licenses that are issued by the state, but Oregon's program doesn't provide any actual like legal basis for doing that. Instead, what will happen is the state will cap the overall amount that may be produced or on the premises at one time, and that'll sort of be not. So it means that we might conceivably have a higher number of smaller growers rather than a few really large ones, which I think is a good way of striking that balance. But it also means that it's going to be hard to, make those businesses solvent.
Well, it sounds to me like this happened with cannabis. There just should be a healthy black market. It's like there'd be a lot of people growing without much fear of retribution. And they're like, I just can't sell it. I threw it away, like, and they could have a lot of product. As you said, it's cheap to do and be less like, okay, I'm not so worried that I happen to be growing a bunch of mushrooms in my place. And I still think there would be a pretty healthy underground, not so underground, because what do you think the difference might be? This is, of course, speculation between what's going on in Oakland or places that have decriminalized and what will happen in Oregon. Do you think it would be the same spirit in the culture, or might it be different?
I think it'll be quite a bit different, in part because these service centers will certainly function as paywalls that will keep people out. And I mean, I'm working with some friends on a service center project that we hope will really set the standard for affordability within the program. Affordability and quality. But there's also, but there's still something intrinsic to having to pay licensed facilitators to hold space and go through that kind of system that will really never allow it to be competitive with the underground. Like it's always going to be cheaper to go, just find something, in the black or gray market than it will be to go to one of these above ground places. But I think in exchange for this extra cost, you do actually get something for that value. From the prep work and just really having a person who's like a partner and really helping you to get the most out of the experience. There is something gained there too. So, the way I conceive of it is the costs under the regulated system have to be at least justifiable in comparison to the unregulated market. And if they're so wildly off base, then there's not going to be anything other than sort of like tourism that gets done under the program. But
I have an idea. I wonder if they could do this. Like, I wonder if there's two thoughts. If it went sort of a telehealth direction, mm-hmm. and you go to the service center, right? But it's really just one person. And they give you your medicines, and they have rooms, and then you go in, and like Journey Space, the thing that Rod and I and Lewis are doing, we are providing the music and maybe online guidance for multiple people at once. It's like scheduled, but there's somebody there kind of in the building to watch over you in a sense, but it's much cheaper because it has this online element. Or because we can go that telehealth, there's another step removed. It's like, well, they start to relax a little bit. It's like you went to the center, you have your overview, you get your medicine, then you can do it at home, and it's with a telehealth provider like Journey Space, and we take you through the journey. And then it would be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, so the program will allow people to do the prep work and the integration offsite, presumably online. So that will help reduce the costs pretty substantially, potentially. And, and there is one of the things that's really interesting to me is, this intersection of psychedelics and creative work. And I think, there's just a lot of kind of psychedelic and visionary art culture that's really flourishing right now. And I think if there could be an above ground kind of place for that, where people didn't have to worry about criminal repercussions, or at least if their only worry was this, federal intervention, I think that allows the culture to flourish in ways that it's flourishing right now for sure. It's really taking off in many ways. But, I think to have have it above ground where there's just no longer any sense of hiding, I think it really could be a pretty significant moment in the broader culture for where this is all headed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask you about these training programs. So I've seen a lot of things pop up a lot over the last year or so of people purporting to train you to be a facilitator. And my initial thought is like, well, who trained these people training people? Is that people just making this up as they go along? And that's the basis of my entire life and artistic careers. I just learn as I go, but and so I'm not totally slagging that, but I am curious, like, who is the arbiter to say what needs to be learned, or is there a standard, and how is that being decided?
So full disclosure, I probably should have announced this at the very beginning. I do have a potential conflict of interest here. I'm the executive director of a facilitator training program that's being offered through the team at Psychedelics Today. And our program is called Vital Oregon, and we are in the process of pursuing licensure and we've already received kind of approval from the Oregon Health Authority that our curriculum meets the state standards. So we're so I do have some bias potentially here that people should consider, I guess. But
spoken like a true lawyer. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. No, it's good to know. It's good to know. Well, so you said you were approved by kind of like a board. It met the standards. Like how did they even come up with what those standards are?
So it was through the whole rulemaking process. The Oregon Health Authority adopted rules back, I believe, in June that circumscribed what must be in a facilitator training program. And at a high level, they required that there be 120 hours of like the core classroom piece of it. And additionally, at least 40 hours of an in-person practicum that must be part of it. And then within the core piece, they kind of go topic by topic, and they require a number of different modules that cover a bunch of different subject areas. And so they kind of set the goalposts in a certain way, or kind of circumscribe it, what must be in there. But then each program has its own opportunity to present that material in its own way, or to add additional material that's not specifically required by the state. So in our program, that's kind of what we've chosen to do. We try to kind of frame it. And there's 15 different programs that have already been approved by the state from the OHAs on their curriculum. So there's kind of substantial interest in this, and how many of them actually make it through all the way to market is going to be interesting to see. But there's also, a wide variety between these different training programs. So one of them, for instance, has what they call an ecological perspective, and they end up, to my view, it looks more kind of like shamanic in its orientation. There's some that are expressly for people who have master's degrees or above in psychotherapy and can work on more therapeutic lens. Our program at Vital Oregon is really trying to create well-rounded facilitators who can function in a diverse and niche ecosystem where people take psychedelics for microdosing or for ceremonial use, or for, just kind of more harm reduction adult use type of applications. So we just want to create facilitators that can function and work the jobs that will arise from a consumer-driven ecosystem. So every training program has its own kind of niche that they fill. So that diversity is its own kind of interesting topic to explore. And I've got an article coming out on that pretty soon in the MAPS bulletin.
Question: could I start a training program that's geared towards music facilitators?
You absolutely could. You would have to still cover all those other topics, but if you wanted to present them through a musical lens, or that would be something you would absolutely be within your right to do.
Talk about that. Question: is one of the requirements for a facilitator to have done a certain number of hours of actually taking psilocybin?
No, actually, and in fact,
outrageous.
Yeah, and there's no requirement that you've ever even taken psilocybin at any point in your whole life as a precondition to operating as a facilitator.
Oh my God. You know, that's the first thing I ask a therapist. Anytime I go in and I'm meeting a new thing, I'm, okay, nice to meet you. What's your ethos? I want to ask you, have you done any psychedelics? Because we need to have like a meeting point on like the numinous. And if we can't even like talk about the untalkable, there's a wall. There's only so far we can go.
Yeah, I mean, how can you expect somebody to be able to guide you if they've never experienced the thing that they're guiding you on, or like direct you in a thing if that's unfamiliar to them? And I think that there's other ways of. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can alter a person's consciousness, and some of them involve substances. Plenty of them don't, and I think that for especially people who have some kind of medical contraindication that would suggest that like they're at a higher risk for taking psilocybin. Like maybe I could see some instances where they still might be extremely well suited for the work, but maybe it just isn't advisable for them to take psilocybin or something. But in general, I think if a person is going to be leading it, they really ought to have experienced it, probably multiple times. So
yeah, probably. Yeah. It's also just out of respect for the medicine itself. It's like if you're going to be learning, it's like ask the mushrooms, or just have your own experience of like it. That's shamanism in a sense. And I'm curious, like how much do you feel like this measure and these programs being put together are honoring all the work that has been done in the underground, the modern underground, but of course also going back thousands of years? Are they listening? Are they paying attention to that?
That is a really tough question to answer. I think the Oregon Health Authority, I mean, I just want to first off acknowledge they have an extremely challenging job in creating one program that's going to serve everyone, or that's their task anyway. And in some ways, I acknowledge it's an impossible task because between people who, affordability is a big piece, and then the cultural sensitivity of the program is also another huge piece, and that means basically learning from indigenous people, from members of the BIPOC community, and it means really hearing diverse perspectives on how people have worked with psilocybin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And honoring and acknowledging those, and when we have a really highly medicalized and advisory board, those other kind of outside views become kind of almost, I don't want to say subversive, but they kind of fly in the face of the kind of paradigm that I think most people are operating under. And so the states had to kind of play this balancing act where they take their advice of their kind of esteemed board and disregard it to some extent where it seems to be kind of reflect a kind of Western type of arrogance and kind of a paternalism that really is at odds with the kind of indigenous and other cultural histories that have surrounded psilocybin and other plant medicines.
Wow.
So the short answer is they probably could do better, but I think that they're trying, and I think that there's a lot of balancing that they have to do, and and I think and this is also just the very beginning, and we're all hoping that as people feel safer, that then they can start relaxing the rules and really allowing this to be less paternalistic and more affordable.
Yeah. Well, as we round out this conversation, thank you for all this information. I'm sure you've been talking and thinking about this for a long time now. Is there anything else do you think I'm missing or is important for us to touch on as in what's going on in the vanguard of psychedelic legalization?
Well, I think that this piece of, this psychedelics industrial complex is being really one of the challenging things of this moment in history as humanity kind of in an above ground official capacity begins to reestablish its relationship with plant medicines. I think it also reflects a larger kind of rejection of a more materialistic worldview, as that's been really probably disappointing to a lot of people who, don't really feel like their heart and soul is fulfilled by, making huge sums of money and devoting their lives to it at the expense of virtually every other aspect of their being. So I think as, humanity is sort of reconsidering this, and, it's a little bit by little bit, but I think as the psychedelic renaissance, so-called renaissance, is kind of gaining more traction, I think it is kind of this moment to pause and reflect on, why are we doing this now after years of prohibition? Like, what is it in our society that is ready for this now, where we weren't really necessarily as on the whole, maybe quite as ready for it before? Or like what, how do we enter this in a way that really ensures that as we set the footing in the kind of framework for this psychedelic, above ground psychedelic culture to kind of start to take off in a way, how do we do it so that it allows basically all people to participate? And I think that's a challenge. And Oregon's program is a first attempt, a first iteration at that. And I think if Colorado's passes here in a couple of weeks, hopefully they do a little better than Oregon does, and hopefully we can continue to improve on it. But it is just this moment where we're hoping that all of these different uses can get along, where, religious use can coexist alongside, medical use, along therapeutic use, and along recreational use, and they can all just kind of coexist and not have to necessarily, be, one doesn't have to come at the cost of the other.
Yeah. Well, it's hopefully just a primary step forward, hopefully, and one of many steps. And somebody had to be first. I'm proud it's my home state, but you're right. It's a bit of an impossible job, but it's really, I'm sure, in the name of safety. And they're really trying to find a way to step forward that's the safest for the most people. But I'm glad you bring up the point of this industrial complex, because, that's how our government works and our world works. It influences on money, and that's what's corrupted basically government to this point. Campaign finance reform's inability to change that. You think about 80% of all the money in psychedelics is going towards drug development right now. That's just showing you where power is moving. So good to keep your eyes wide open on that one. I think the more egalitarian we can make it and break down those walls for access, the better it can be. And then to provide people tools to have safe and positive journeys. That's certainly my ethos. But nobody should be going to jail for this kind of stuff unless they're for possession, at least,
Yeah, and it would just be such a strange irony if psychedelics became just kind of another vehicle through which income, stratification gets deepened, and class divides become deepened, and
what a flip,
psychedelics
Yeah,
become another vehicle for that. Then it would just be this like really kind of like a real tragedy.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for doing the work to track this and keep an eye on it. It sounds like it's a fast-moving situation. It's going to be coming online theoretically, 6 months or less?
January, yeah.
January, oh my God. So that's about to have January 2023, depending on when people are listening to this. And Colorado's on deck, and I think maybe California, is that right?
California is going through the legislative process, so theirs is different than the ballot initiative, but they've got a really interesting law that's kind of percolating and may still make its way to the governor's desk here, hopefully.
What other states? And we got Rick Perry. He's an advocate.
It's so strange how this has been less polarizing than cannabis. You would think in some ways this is a more.
I think it's the vets. I think it's the angle of the military, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, Rick Doblin, I think, really did something truly brilliant by, identifying, veterans as kind of a great common ground that everyone can agree on, as recipients of the benefits for psychedelics, or from MDMA specifically. But
yeah. Mm. Well, cool, John. What's the best way for people to learn more, or any projects you're working on, to stay connected?
Yes, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's probably my social media like home, so to speak. But you can find me on there, and I'm also on Twitter, and I think that's probably about it.
What's your LinkedIn handle?
I think it's John. I should
You
know this.
think?
I think it's John-Dennis-Psychedelic, I want to say. But I'll have an answer for you here in just a second. Yeah, John-Dennis, linkedin.com/John-Dennis-Psychedelic.
Okay. Well, thank you, John-Dennis-Psychedelic, for taking the time. And it's good to see you again. And I really appreciate you in illuminating this for me. And I'm sure many other people are trying to see the fog through all this activity going on. See through the fog.
Yeah, thanks, Krishna. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the work that you do to help advance these conversations. I think it's just really important that that the people, normalizing happens when we start talking about it. So this forum that you create is just such an important part of the puzzle.
Well, talking and listening. Well, thanks again, my friend. Hope to talk again.
Okay, thanks, Krishna.
Thank you, John, for coming on the show. And thank you for helping make things in Oregon with 109, influencing it to be more equitable, peaceful, and loving. This song that you're hearing in the background is just a sneak preview of a track called Assured, and it is off the new album Headwaters that's coming out on November 11th is the plan. I apologize if that has to change, but that's our plan. 11/11, Headwaters will come out, and it's a new 4-track EP, 45-minute record of mine, and this is a bit of what it is. It's a lot of piano, beautiful grand piano with some subtle sort of electronic pads that I created underneath it, with some actual sounds of nature that were coming through the windows at the ranch where we recorded this in southern Utah. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Hope to see everyone else who could make it for the rest of this tour. It goes until November 20th in the western part of the United States. Get your tickets now at eastforest.org/tour while the getting's good. And until then, and through then, you keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, do it with grace.